used to love playing all the old SNES games. However, as I moved out of my parents' house and into my own place, some of the cartridges ended up lost. I decided for curiosity's sake to run by and see if I could find them. At their house, my mom stood at the attic entrance, joking that girls shouldn't love games so much. I shrugged off her comments as I continued searching through boxes. I spotted a box with my name lazily written on it in black marker, and as I searched through it, rummaging past old dolls and notebooks, I saw the familiar bold letters. Super Metroid. I grabbed it and pulled it out of the box and grinned at one of my old favorites. I came across Punch-Out and Super Mario World and a Final Fantasy or two, and took them home with me as well. After I set up my SNES again, I grabbed the Super Metroid cart and blew it out thoroughly before putting it in and starting it up. It started normally, Nintendo 1994, Nintendo presents Metroid 3, the zoom out to the Metroid in the tank with the scientist corpses and the title Super Metroid coming up on the screen, all accompanied by the title music and Metroid screeches. I hit start and started to load up my old profile. And then I remembered. My brother deleted all the files on the cartridge when we were younger as a revenge plot, and I just never got near the end of the game again. So, as a custom of mine, I selected Samus B and started with a memorable introduction. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. I watched through Samus' speech of how she foiled Mother Brain's plans in fighting the Metroids, and how she met the larva. I continued through the game, started at Ceres Station. I walked Samus through the blue-tinted station and through the doors, to have the first encounter with Ridley. I shuddered a bit as I walked through the room with the dead scientist. Something always seemed weird to me about that room. I then arrived at the room with the Metroid capsules in it. The Metroid's colors were distorted. The red was purple and the green was yellow, I assumed. Since the cartridge had gone through quite a bit of fighting between me and my brother, it might have gotten the colors a bit mixed with the dying Metroid of the final boss. I walked over to it and shot around for a bit, then walked back to the door to start the battle. Ridley's orange-yellow eyes glowed. And then his entire form appeared, letting out a roar as he grabbed the Metroid and flew up. I hopped around shooting him until he turned red and dropped the Metroid capsule, then swooped down to retrieve it. I shot him a few more times until he flew up, then at the screen and, disappearing, emergency, self-destruct sequence activated. Evacuate colony immediately came up, including the 60-second timer. I rushed Samus through the station, got to the exit, and she blasted off in her ship before the colony had exploded. After arriving on planet Zebes, I took Samus inside and went down to get the morphing ball. Went around for a bit and got some missiles, saved at a save station, went to get the bombs to fight the Shozo statue. I grabbed the bombs and waited for a statue to come to life. It shakily stood up and screeched as it started to attack. I jumped back and forth over it, shooting missiles at it until its stomach burst, and its head fell off and it collapsed. I collected the health and missiles and left. I went back to the saver and after saving, turned into a morph ball and dropped some bombs onto the wall. It crumbled and I rolled through to go from Crateria to Brinstar. After going through for a while, I came to Spore Spawn. Instead of spores falling through the ceilings, little fireballs fell. I guess it mixed Ridley's fireballs with the spores. As he pops out, it seems he's already taken damage. His green has faded to a brown and... is it as if when you're about to kill him, I'd say. He swings around for a bit and then opens his mouth, his core swollen and red as well. I hopped on a ledge and shot a missile at his core, and he turned a light brown and died. Health and energy littered the room. I grabbed it all and hopped up to get the super missiles. I went through more of the game's grabbing power-up, and eventually got to the next boss, Kraid. He also seemed to have taken much damage recently, and his eyes were lit up yellow as if he was getting ready to roar. I shot him and questionably started the battle. The game was simply getting boring with the cartridge issues. Kraid let out a loud roar as he fell through the ground and died. I continued through the game, the bosses always having major damage before the battle, and their colors and attacks altered. Crocomyre's colors were chilled blue instead of burning red, and one missile sent him back almost as far as 2 super missiles. Phantoon's eyes looked bloodshot, and his body was already darkened from damage. His fire was large and blazing red rather than small and light blue. When I got to Meridia, the swimming enemies weren't there, and the water had been somewhat drained. Botwoon seemed to be stuck in a hole, and one missile killed him. I couldn't electrocute Dragon for some reason, so I ended up having to attack him with super missiles. He was foaming purple at the mouth, similar to Mother Brain, and he was already rather damaged. The Golden Chozo moved, extremely slow and couldn't attack. I finally got to Ridley again, as I made my way through Norfair to attack him. His loud roar rang out randomly. I got to his lair and stood on the platform, waiting for battle. Ridley appeared, a darker purple-black than usual. He roared loudly, but the roar was distorted. It was much deeper and much louder. The sound of it made hair stand up on the back of my neck. I continued through the battle and cheered as I killed the wretched thing. I continued to Torain to fight Mother Brain. None of the turrets shot at Samus, which I found rather weird. I hopped over to the tank with Mother Brain, yet it was already busted. I shrugged and shot a missile into her, and the floor fell way to the room. Her screech was slowed down, and the foam from her mouth was a dark red. Her pulsing brain was bright, signaling damage, as was her body. Mother Brain immediately started charging up the unmissable beam. The rainbow flashing beam shot at Samus and drained much more energy than I'd even remembered. She started charging the next one, and, of course, the Metroid with the same color issues flew in and sucked the energy out of her. Mother Brain fell into a fetal position as the Metroid flew to Samus and started giving her energy. Mother Brain drooled more deep red. She came back to life and shot the Metroid, killing it instantaneously. This didn't faze me. It's what happens in the regular game, of course. But the Metroid dying so suddenly rather than fighting did. Not only were bosses incredibly weak, the Metroid was too. Samus stood up with the Hyper Beam and started to kill Mother Brain. 10 seconds she was dead. Instead of a countdown to evacuate the planet, nothing had happened. A text box came up, and instead of evacuate, it said, "Are you happy?" I pressed a few buttons and another one came up. All of them are gone. Are you happy? And it came up with a yes or no option. I thought about the gameplay. It was rather boring. No, I certainly was not happy, so I selected no. The entire room slowly filled up with lava. I jumped with Screwball and continued space jumping in the air to stay out of it. And after a few moments, it filled the entire room. Samus sunk to the bottom. I panicked trying to find an exit, but the room had none. Samus's health tanks drained rapidly until it froze. It then went to the white death screen with Samus's armored sprite. Instead of bursting open normally with the final cry sound, small red pixels dripped from the seams of the suit. Afterwards, the suit burst open, and Zero Suit Samus fell to the ground in a pose like the dead scientists. But the animation of the sprite showed she was still alive. Ridley's distorted roar was heard. He swooped down and grabbed Samus. She was posed like the suit burst pose as Ridley crushed her into his claws. He dropped her down to the white screen again. I waited, pressing buttons and wondering if it froze. I heard Samus's final cry ring out repeatedly, high-pitched and loud. It made me drop the controller and clutch my ears. It went to the game over screen, yet the text was changed. You failed. Continue, yes, continue, or no. Back to the main menu. I wasn't done with the game yet. I can't believe I acted like this game was a person I hated, but I did. It started my last save before Mother Brain. I repeated what happened when the box came up again and I selected yes. It took around 30 seconds off my time to escape, so I had to power run through the planet frantically. I got to the ship with about 10 seconds to spare and tried to enter. It wouldn't let me until the very last second. I boarded it and blasted off. I watched the credits of the game stare blankly at the screen. I had finished the game, but what the hell was up with the cartridge? After the credits, the Samus sprite with red dripping from the seams came up at the end with a thumbs up. See you in X mission. And the screen went to black. The roar of Ridley, the screech of Chozo, Spore Spawn's wheeze, Kraid's growl, Crocomyre's scream, Fantoon's hiss, Botwoon's groan, Dragon's gurgling, Mother Brain's squeal, and Samus's final cry all rang out in a cycle, growing rapidly louder. The jump I got from it knocked my heavy metal chair to the side, basically snapping the cartridge in half as it fell over top of it. I let out an irritated groan and ripped the SNES out of the wall, tossing it to the side. I sat on the floor and held my head in my hands, going over the events of the title. The sound of Samus's final cry still sends chills down my spines, making memories of the cartridge flow back. Well, that was probably one of the better Metroid creepypastas I've read. Not that we've read so many or anything. This one felt very close to some of the earlier creepypastas we focused on, where the typical trope of abandoning the game as a child and then having it transform on you when you reach adulthood is ever so present. And of course, we've seen that trope through time and time again. It's not like it's, very early on. We've seen it pop up ever so often. As far as this is concerned, though, it took it way more subtle than what I had expected. Usually something like this can go so far off the beaten path that it ends up cringy, but this thankfully didn't. However, it played way too safe for what is in essence an internet campfire tale. The real meat of differences in the creepypasta come through in the end when Mother Brain is fought, and while the screenshots provided do an amazing task at helping you visualize, I'm still a little split on the way it had ended. Now, I do not want it to go off the beaten path. That is just something that kills it off completely. But this played it way too safe. And while I would be initially a little uncomfortable over how it ended, at the same time I do sort of appreciate it. One of the things the creepypastas can definitely use, which I don't mention a lot, is the use of subtlety. So if you have something that's subtle, it actually ends up making it more creepier than what it could normally be. Just because that allows you to actually, see it in a more eerie tone. If it plays itself safe, then it passes off as a, weird thing that happens to you in a video game. If you really sat there and actually put yourself into those shoes that this player had put themselves into, if this had happened to you, it would seem far more believable than some demon, haunting you from the video game and ending up possessing you later on through your speakers. That would just be going far off the beaten path, and that would honestly kill whatever the creepypasta had initially set out to do in the first place. This one, although it was subtle, and of course I am again split on if it should have went a little bit deeper, or at least have added some more length to it to sort of not really pad out, but actually, build upon individual, points on it in a more real, it would actually focus on itself far more than it actually did now, rather than leaving all of that creepy stuff towards the end and leaving the first two acts of it completely just, the regular game plus some minor additions here and there. That would have been great, and I wish it did that more than it had done what it did now, but at the same time, I'm also glad that it focused on subtlety, which again is very important, rather than going balls to the wall intending to try to make it really creepy and ending up shooting itself in both feet. That being said, that was what I thought of Super Metroid, and yes, again, that is the title for the creepypasta. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it, and let me know what you thought about this creepypasta in the comment section below, what you would change and what you would rate it, and all that kind of stuff. This has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, part of Creepypastas. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.